So I just wanted to make a quick video, as usual, to sort of recap what we're doing, where we're headed, etc. And so I want to kind of summarize some of the things I saw on your resumes. I want to give you some tips on how to provide good feedback for your cover letters, and then I also just want to give you some tips in thinking about your cover letter broadly conceived, and as you work on those revisions, these are things that you may want to keep in mind. So generally speaking, I was very pleased with the resumes, but there were a few things that I found myself writing on many of them, and so I think it's worth sharing to the entire class what those pieces of feedback look like. First and foremost, I want you to remember that, and this will be reinforced this week as you learn about contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, a tool called CRAP. You need to keep in mind that a resume needs to be read very quickly. So you only have a short period of time to make that impact, and what that means is that you have to think carefully about how you place the elements on the page. And what I think you'll ultimately find when you look at the two samples posted in the Week 4 folder is that you really can't separate form from content on a resume. And what I mean by that is you can have a resume that has exceptional content, the actual language, the words, the experiences, the skills, those things are very solid. But if they're not presented in a user-friendly way, that really detracts from the messaging. And so it's really important for us to think carefully not only about what we put on the page, but how we place it on the page. And so how that manifests itself in part is the order in which you present information, how you categorize or compartmentalize information on the page, what types of headings you choose to use, etc. So it's something that I want you to think very carefully about. A resume isn't just a blanket list of things that you've done. It's a carefully curated and selected list of things that hopefully delivers a message of what makes you exceptionally and uniquely qualified. So that is something that I want you to really have ingrained in your mind through this process. The other thing that I found myself commenting on quite frequently in your resumes was this idea of transferability. And so it's really important. At the community college, it's very common for folks to be moving and making pretty dramatic or drastic shifts in their career trajectory. And so you may be moving from one field to an entirely different field. And you may feel like, and this is normal, that your skills are not all that transferable because you're moving into a totally different realm. You could be moving from manufacturing into healthcare, for instance. But what's really important to remember is that those experiences are very valuable in that they provide you with a set of supporting skills that you really need to highlight for the employer. And those things do not just naturally communicate themselves. In other words, you cannot just rely on a job title, or you cannot just rely on a place of employment to communicate all of those things. It's incumbent upon you as the writer of the resume really to articulate that to the reader. And so the way that I think is most effective to do that is to, in bullet point format, underneath the previous place of employment and underneath the previous job title or position, you should be listing out in a way driven by verbs or actions, the transferable skills you developed there. And so it's really important that you focus on transferable skills. So if you were a laborer, for instance, and I have many students, many of you out there probably have been laborers, for maybe a landscaping company, and now you're moving into electrical. You have a tremendous set of transferable skills there, but you are belying those skills if you just state the sort of day-to-day activities that you did, like you weed whacked, for instance, or you applied pesticide. Those things are not necessarily transferable. You're not going to do those exact things in this new context. So you have to zoom out and really focus on the things that are transferable, things like safety, things like careful operation of hand and power tools, etc. So you really have to focus on the things that can move from one context to another. And it's really easy to get fixated on the exact tasks that you did, but sometimes you have to zoom out and actually in some ways be more abstract and allow the reader to see those lines of transfer. And again, those things are not always obvious, and so it's up to you to fill in the blanks on those. And so that's really important. The other thing that I found myself telling folks a lot was don't undersell your education. For many of you, the credential that you're going to earn here at KVCC, whether it's a certificate or an associate's degree, that's going to become your calling card, and that's going to become the most relevant and important credential that you have. And so it's important for you to get the most mileage or traction out of that. So a couple of things to keep in mind. One, get your degree right. So make sure that you have the correct title of your degree listed there. If it's appropriate, and if you've taken specialized coursework that you think is relevant to the position for which you're applying, then you can absolutely list those relevant courses. In fact, that may signal to the reader that you have specialized training in an area that really matters to them, and I highly encourage that. Again, the title of your degree and the place where you received it does not communicate all of that information naturally or necessarily, so it's up to you to fill in those blanks. A reader may have a pretty good idea of what you learned in the energy services technology program here, or the electrical line working technology program, or the welding technology program here, but they may not know the full extent of it, or the precision machining program. So it's up to you to communicate maybe the types of equipment that you're comfortable with, or the types of materials that you've worked with, or the types of techniques or approaches that you've used. And so sometimes those things are communicated in terms of the coursework that you've taken, but you may have to include that otherwise, just by, again, including bullet points that say familiar with, and share your familiarity with particular things. So just make sure that you're getting the most mileage you can out of your education. Again, it's the proof of your technical ability, and it's super, super important. So those were really the three core things that I saw in looking at most people's resumes, and of course I added individual feedback, and everybody came up with some really spot-on revision plans, and so you'll have some time to work on those. And again, you're going to learn about a concept this week called CRAP, and that really is where you're going to start to really think about what can you do in terms of the way that you've put this information on the page to accentuate it, to make it easier to read, because the resume ultimately is an interface in the same way that a computer program has an interface that allows you to access certain things and do certain things. The resume is an interface between you and the employer, and you need to make that interface user-friendly, intuitive, and easy to use. So readers should be able to find the information that they care about as quickly as possible. And I think CRAP is going to be one of the ways, one of the avenues that we take in order to get to that destination. And you're going to see that manifest itself, I think, pretty dramatically in the 2 sample resumes that I've posted. So take a close look at those, study those as close as you can, and I think that you'll see how important the format is, and how important it is to be very intentional about how and where we place stuff on the page. Okay, so you're also going to be providing feedback to your peers in the feedback form about their cover letters. And it's no secret to me that peer review can be a giant waste of time, and that people are very reluctant to take part in it because they've had less than optimal experiences in the past, and I get that. It's my hope that in this class you'll become a better reviewer, and I think that it's really important to remember that a lot of the writing that takes place in the workplace doesn't necessarily start from ground zero. It doesn't start from a blank document. A lot of times in the workplace, what we're asked to do is to take a look at an existing document or piece of writing and then offer feedback or revision ideas to improve it. And so you not only have to be a good inventor of texts, and that's something that we're going to practice in this class, and that is you start with a blank sheet of paper and you build a document, but we also have to be really good revisers and analyzers of existing work, and so that's what we're going to practice in the feedback form. And I don't expect us to be perfect at it this time around, but I do expect it to be a competency that we build throughout the course. And so ultimately what I want you to do is I want you to approach every text as a reader. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a specific vocabulary to talk about the writing. You just have to approach it as a reader, genuinely trying to understand the message that's being communicated through the text. And so if you have questions, or something's not clear to you, or you don't understand something, then there's a good chance other readers won't either. And so it's really important for you to raise those questions. I've, of course, given you a set of questions to take a look at relative to the cover letter, things that are specific to that genre or type of writing. But I also want you to feel free to go off script. If somebody uses a term that you're not clear about, then you should raise that concern and say, I'm not sure what this means, I'm not sure why it's significant. Or if you have questions about the applicant or the cover letter, be courageous and ask those questions, because ultimately that's going to help the writer that you're working with answer those questions. And so I can't stress enough how important it is, and it's an ethic that we're going to build in this class, that good writers are typically good writers because they're good revisers. They seek out feedback, they utilize feedback, and they use that to fuel these feedback loops. And so in that way, writing is sort of an iterative process, kind of like an engineer. And so we need to be really comfortable in doing that. And so I'm challenging you to take a look at a couple of your peers' cover letters, to ask questions, to run through the questions that I've provided for you that get us thinking about, does this look and act like a cover letter? Does it contain the evidence that it needs? Does it have the claims that will resonate with the reader, etc.? And ultimately, again, if you just approach it as a reader and you give your most honest assessment that you can, that's going to be very helpful. And so be confident in that, that if you observe something, it's kind of like that adage, if you see something, say something. It's true in feedback too. Chances are, if you're having an issue understanding something, the significance of something, the implications of something, the meaning of something, then other people will too, because you're all smart people, and so you're doing that person a great service by raising that question. That's really important. So as you move forward in your cover letter, just keep in mind what the goals of a cover letter are. Remember that it is a writing sample, so you want your writing to be as crisp and as easy to read as possible. Remember that you're making a series of claims about yourself, so you are telling the reader essentially what makes you exceptionally and uniquely qualified for the position. But it's not enough just to tell people. You have to show them. So show them where you exercise those skills. And that raises another interesting point about your resumes that I forgot to mention, and that is if you're going to have a skills section, make sure that your skills section includes tangible technical skills. If they are more in line with supporting skills or soft skills like communication, leadership, teamwork, the ability to work in a fast-paced environment, the ability to work independently, problem solving, those are great things. But just as standalone bullet points, they're relatively abstract, and frankly, they're not that compelling. So what you're much better off doing, and I wrote this on a number of people's resumes, is you're better off showing us where you practice those supporting skills. So if you're going to tell me you're a good communicator or an effective communicator, you're much better off showing me how you've done that and through what means you've done that in the descriptions of your previous work experiences. So just keep that in mind. And ultimately, you're doing the same thing in the cover letter. And this is your opportunity to really give the reader a lens through which to see your resume. And so it's important for you to support any claims that you're making with really compelling evidence. And we want to do this relatively economically. We don't want to drag on. We don't want to write a novel. So we want to put our best qualities in front of the reader, and we want to provide the most compelling evidence that we can. Finally, and this is super important, you also want to demonstrate a level of compatibility, so just make sure that you are doing what you can to show knowledge of the company and demonstrating that you'd be a good fit, whatever that means. It could mean the population of people that they work with. It could be the way that they go about their business. It could be what niche they sort of occupy in the market or in the industry. And those types of things will demonstrate in a compelling way, and I think in a convincing way, not only that you've done your homework, but that you're really tailoring your message and your candidacy to that particular employer. And I think if we do those things and we hold ourselves accountable to those things, we are immediately going to rise to the top of the list when it comes to our resumes and cover letters. So that's what we're up against. You'll be submitting your graded version of your resume and cover letter in week number 5. So I will poke into the forum this weekend, and after everybody has had a chance to post their own feedback, I'll go in and add comments on everybody's cover letters too, just to sort of summarize, to again fuel that revision process so that you can improve those documents. We are in the business of continuous improvement, and so as I say, and I'll leave you with this, writing's never done, it's just due. So what we want to do is our best effort to continue and kind of keep the ball moving. Every time we touch a document, we want to improve it in some way. We want to add value to the reader in some way, and that's ultimately what we're doing this week as we work on our resumes and cover letters. So as always, if you have any questions or concerns, if you have trouble with the feedback form or anything like that, I'm just a text, a phone call, or an email away, and I will be as responsive as I possibly can. And if anybody needs any additional support, meaning that they want to access my office hours, I'm happy to meet with you at a time that is mutually convenient for us. And I think that you should do that if you feel at all like you could use an extra set of eyes or a little bit of extra assistance as you push these documents hopefully towards their best versions yet. So thanks a lot.